The dusk of autumn 1944 always carried a tired smell of damp. In the Balkan Valley, the soil turned loose and greasy after daytime bombardments. A faint metallic stench rising from it, mixed with the bitter scent of burnt gauze. Andrei Vasile spent his first and only year at the front in this kind of air. He was only 22, yet already skilled enough to find the right angle to bandage a torn forearm in complete darkness. At that age, he should have been learning how to become an agricultural mechanic or continuing to haul crates for the village doctor. But the shifting front had cut him out of that life and thrown him to the lines, into a world where he could only rely on instinct to judge the boundary between clean and filthy. He was used to cleaning wounds with cold water. Cold meant it came from a natural source, unprocessed, hiding no drugs or dangerous additives. At the front, any liquid at the wrong temperature triggered automatic suspicion. Warm water usually came from damaged pipes or improvised heaters, often contaminated with metal dust, ash, fuel, or unknown solvents, never to be trusted on bare skin. He knew how to use a dirt-stained bandage to wipe off blood, but he had never truly believed there existed such a thing as a stable, truly clean water supply. Cleanliness was a luxury. Water was something you gambled lives on, not something to be used at will. To maintain the bare minimum dignity of a field orderly, he exposed his hands to the coldest water he could find every day and treated the numbness in his fingers as proof that his work was being done properly. Defeat came faster than he had imagined. He fell back from collapsing positions, tramping along churned, wet roads in the valley until, by the time he reached the point of surrender, he no longer knew whether he was frozen stiff or simply too exhausted to feel pain. At the prisoner assembly camp, the first thing that unsettled him was not the wire nor the American rifles, but a kind of rear area order, counting, registration, classification, disinfection, the issuing of numbers. He had no way to resist any of it, yet every step left him taut as a wire. The procedures were too clean, too fluent, giving him the feeling he was being swallowed by some enormous machine. On the ship taking him to the American South, he was first ordered to wash his hands in the hold. It was his first time seeing such a large metal sink, but the ship only used ordinary cold water, which raised no questions for him. In that cramped space, he simply extended the rules of his old world. Trust only cold water, only natural temperature, only the sting of near-freezing water that proved it could strip away blood, grease, dirt. Some fellow prisoners pressed their hands into the water until their skin turned white, assuming it would make them look more obedient. Andrei only kept to a corner, treating the water as a limited reserve, not as a supply one could draw on casually. When the ship made port, the air of the south brought a completely different kind of humidity. The wind no longer carried smoke or the damp chill of danger, but a temperature somewhere between warm and harmless. Alongside more than 20 other prisoners, he was assigned to a farm, entering a long-established family system with a precise internal structure. The moment he jumped down from the truck bed, he smelled dry hay, the resin in lumber storage, the faint scent of laundry soap drifting from the washroom, and the cold, clean chill that seeped out from where food was kept. The mix of smells resembled neither the front nor the barracks. Its quietness unsettled him. The first thing he noticed was not the farmer, not the fencing, not even the tasks he'd been assigned, but the edge of a metal sink showing through the side kitchen door. It had been polished bright, like an object that had rarely, if ever, met blood. Above it hung a metal faucet, its surface smooth, free of smoke stains or corrosion, with no trace of ever having been disassembled. On either side were copper handles, each stamped with markings. He did not know what they meant and could only treat them as warning signs. Instinct kept him away. By the logic of the front, the structure was too fine, too symmetrical, too intact. The more complete something was, the less safe it usually was. He was sent first to sort tools in the storehouse, then to move feed on the far side of the yard, passing the kitchen door several times and each time deliberately avoiding a direct glance at the sink. But the smell reached him whenever he went by. Soap powder, the faint scent of pine from clean cloth, and a steady, even, repetitive domestic smell. In wartime, smells never stayed that stable. Stability meant some hidden technique or surplus was upholding an order. On the third afternoon, the farmer told him to wash the dust off his hands before helping to sort milk bottles. He nodded, unaware he was about to encounter something completely beyond his experience. When he stepped in through the side door, the light fell across the metal counter, picking out the twin-handled faucet. Another prisoner was there, washing apples, moving with complete ease. He twisted one handle casually, and the water came down in a stream, so even it seemed set not by chance, but by some internal calibration. The man put his hands in the water without a second thought. Andrei stopped dead in the doorway. He saw the faintest thread of steam rising from the stream. Steam meant heat, and heat meant unnatural and tampered with, a liquid into which something might have been introduced. His breathing went shallow. He could not tell if what he sensed was danger or illusion. He had never seen steam rising from a regular sink in a civilian kitchen. The sight felt like an invisible hand reaching from some future world to tear a slit in his old one. He stood on the threshold as if forced to look straight at something he had no language for. He did not step in at once. His toes hovered on the threshold for several seconds. The light fell directly into the center of the stream. The steam was so thin it seemed like a line etched in the air, impossible to judge as mere warmth or hallucination. The other prisoner finished washing, set the apples on a towel to dry, and turned off the handle with casual familiarity, not even glancing at the water temperature, as if he had long been used to water like this. He never noticed Andrei's rigid posture in the doorway. He simply walked past, carrying with him the sun-warmed smell of grass, and left the kitchen. Andrei could not move for a while. He knew he had to go to the water, but his body reacted faster than his thoughts, insisting, "This is not normal water." Normal water did not flow like this in a household kitchen. Normal water did not hold steady warmth in undamaged pipes without any sign of a heater. War had taught him to question every configuration that was too clean, too smooth. Hot water usually meant someone was treating wounds here, or a boiler has failed nearby, or the water is mixed with cleansers, metal filings, chemical residue released by heating. And now, in an ordinary kitchen, no front line, no damage, no medical tent, a constant, stable warmth was being produced. The contrast made his chest tighten. He stepped forward in the end. The sound of his boots on the wooden floor was very soft, yet to his own ears it felt heavy. Reaching the sink, he held his hands just ahead of the stream, refusing to touch it yet, watching the speed of the falling water. The flow was even, the color clear. None of the pale brown, grayish-white or gritty, pseudo-clean shades so common during the war. But the steam disturbed him. His discomfort was not fear, so much as not understanding. He bent slightly, bringing his face closer to the basin, and sniffed the vapor with the trained caution of a medic. All he smelled was the faint scent rising from a clean metal surface mixed with a trace of soap. No acrid fumes, no sting. But he sniffed a second, then a third time, as if waiting for some hidden toxicity to finally reveal itself. War had taught him that danger often made itself known only on the third test. Still, nothing. That, more than anything, sharpened his alertness. The flow held its temperature, did not waver when he moved closer, did not cool now that the previous user had gone. It was like a segment of rhythm anchored there independently of the people around it, requiring no judgment, no adjustment. Turn the handle, and it appeared. He took a deep breath and brought his right hand to the edge of the stream, aiming for the lightest possible contact. The instant the water met his fingertip, his reflexes snapped tight, his whole arm jerking away. The heat was not scalding, but its very consistency left a foreign imprint on his skin. Not natural temperature, not from the outside world, not obviously harmless, possibly mixed with something. He stepped back half a pace and raised his hand, examining his fingertips. No redness, no blanching, no burns, no peeling or softening. He worried he was overreacting, forced his breathing to slow, but the tension in his chest still vibrated like a distant air raid siren. He moved in again, this time keeping his hand just beside the stream, not within it. watching the way drops slid across the metal, checking for sediment. His training pushed him to look for what can't be seen. In wartime, he had never known a household water supply capable of holding temperature this steady, let alone at the twist of a handle. His heart was racing now. His gaze moved to the two handles. The left shone a little brighter, edges more worn, clearly the one used more often. The right was slightly darker, its surface calmer. He did not know which was hot and which was cold, but the other prisoner had turned the left. Perhaps the danger lay there. He did not experiment immediately. Instead, he rolled his sleeves to the elbow and ran his fingers around the basin, touching the catchment area. The metal was cool. Cool meant the heat source was not under the sink, but somewhere in the depths of the system. That only unsettled him more. If the source lay hidden, the heating process was out of sight. Hidden meant he had no way to know what had been done to the water. At last, he twisted the right-hand handle, just a fraction. The stream thinned briefly, but the temperature remained warm. He quickly turned it back and tried the left instead. When he opened the left a little further, the steam rose just slightly more thickly, only a little, but enough to make him instinctively step back. He had learned that harmful substances often vaporize more readily at higher temperatures. The more he thought, the more convinced he became that this warm water was not fit for skin. He began to suspect that Americans used some kind of mild cleansing fluid to maintain domestic hygiene, something that might not be safe for prisoners. He pictured disinfectant fed straight into the household pipes and diluted across the entire kitchen. The image made every joint in his fingers tense. He chose the cold instead. He snapped the right-hand handle fully open, nearly closing the left. The stream turned biting cold, yet purer than any water he had known at the front. He plunged his hands in and scrubbed hard, but within 10 seconds he stopped again. Another realization struck him. He was overusing cold water just to avoid dangerous warm water, and on this American farm that behavior might be meaningless. He sniffed his hands again to be sure nothing remained, then wiped his palms dry with the edge of an apron. The way he dried them was too deliberate, resembling a lab cleanup more than an ordinary wash. As he looked up, the farmer's wife came into the kitchen. Passing him without any concern at all, she turned the left-hand handle and calmly placed her hands straight into the warm flow. Her movements were light, natural, without a moment's hesitation. She even lifted her head to glance out the window while she washed, visibly thinking about how many pieces of chicken to fry for lunch, rather than what might be in the water. She dried her hands, then tipped a pot of boiled noodles into the strainer. The entire sequence had the smooth rhythm of something repeated countless times without incident. Andrei's breathing caught again. If there really was danger in the water, why was she unharmed? Why was her skin unchanged? Why were the children able to touch it freely? Did their bodies somehow adapt to this water? Did their diet protect them from anything in it? Did they possess some unseen protection? Or did they simply not care about potential contaminants at all? Perhaps they lived in a world where such questions no longer mattered. Perhaps the water itself required no suspicion. The possibilities flashed one after another and dissolved. None quite explained the steady, impossible reliability of that temperature. He stood rigid, shoulders locked, as if he had just walked away from an ambush. That night he used dry hay to clean his hands instead of washing them. It was not about clinging to frontline habits, but about something else. For the first time, he had realized he did not know whether what he was facing was genuine cleanliness or some unknown substance a whole civilization had decided to deem safe. Lying in the dark, he could still feel the memory of that warmth on his fingers, like the touch of a future age reaching back toward him, a touch he could not classify as either gift or trap. The next morning the air was faintly damp. Mist hung low over the grass, blurring the farm like a map folded too many times. Before his first assignment, Andrei passed the side kitchen door again. He deliberately avoided looking at the faucet, yet the faint smell of warm water in the air was impossible to ignore. He realized that his attention to this matter now far exceeded his sensitivity to any danger sign at the front. Once he had tracked footprints, cordite, the layering of wounds. Now he was tracking a too stable domestic phenomenon. He began to keep records, not on paper but in his head. stacking information the way he had always catalogued risk. He estimated how many times a day the sink was used, checked whether the handles shifted position unconsciously under the family's hands, and even timed how quickly the steam dispersed once the faucet was shut. The rates were almost identical each time, as if governed by some consistent law, and the family seemed utterly unconcerned with that consistency. That, more than anything, tightened him further. On the front, instability was the rule. Here, instability felt like the anomaly. Now and then, while sorting feed, he watched the pipes on the outside kitchen wall, tracing them with his eyes from the faucet to where they disappeared into the ground. He tried to locate the heat source, but the pipes hugged the wall and vanished underground. It was impossible to tell where the warmth had come from. They were firmly fixed. No visible repairs, no patches. It was like a hidden network piping hot water from an invisible core to any point that needed temperature. The idea of a hidden core alarmed him. He had never thought of a household as a system, but here he sensed a hole he could not grasp. Warm water was only one manifestation of it, joined by the radio, the refrigerator, the boxes of laundry powder, all woven into a pattern with a rhythm. He began to distrust the radio. The program came on at fixed times every day, the volume low, but enough to divide the day into morning, noon, and evening. Whenever the broadcast started, certain actions in the house seemed to follow automatically: the clatter of clearing the table, the start-up thump of the washing machine drum, the sound of a child jumping down from the porch. The rhythm needed no orders, no coordination. It had been absorbed into life. More than once in a single day, Andrei noticed what seemed like a pattern. Warm water use at the sink increased slightly whenever the radio came on. He couldn't be sure it wasn't his imagination, but the possibility of any link was enough to quicken his pulse. He started to wonder if the radio did more than mark time, if it also signaled the start of some wider system, a switch for heating perhaps. The idea wasn't especially reasonable, but for someone from a world of chaos, every pattern suggested some mechanism behind it. He even imagined a relationship between hot-cold water ratios and loads on the power grid, and between that grid and strategies for managing prisoner behavior. The thoughts were vague, more like scattered sparks than a coherent theory, but they kept lighting up in his mind, impossible to ignore. One afternoon, while tidying the barn, he saw 3 fresh boxes of laundry powder stacked by the washroom door. The printing on them was clear, and the instructions laid out precise measures for usage, temperature ranges, and foam strength in a way he had never seen before. When his eyes fell on the line that read, "Best results with warm water," something struck hard in his chest. Why did warm water work best? Was it because the powder contained chemicals that only activated at higher temperatures? Could those chemicals harm skin? If laundry detergent became more active in warm water, did that mean warm water itself might be carrying other unseen agents? He had no answers, only a growing stack of questions. By evening he had begun to suspect that warm water could not truly clean hands. It was too gentle, caused no sting, did not make the skin tighten, did not shock the filth away. The logic he had brought from the front told him only water cold enough to numb your fingers could constrict vessels around a wound and thus reduce infection. The more he thought, the more warm water seemed not dangerous so much as untrustworthy by design. His distrust peaked on the 3rd morning. He was straightening a haystack when a short mechanical sound came from the kitchen, followed by the radio's signal tone. The broadcast, in its usual calm voice, announced that the hot water system would be temporarily shut down for maintenance and was expected to resume in an hour. It reminded family members to draw cold water if they needed it in the meantime. Andrei froze, hay still in his hands. His first reaction was not curiosity, but anticipation of disorder. At the front, any system pause triggered a chain reaction. Untreated wounds, collapsed boilers, broken communications, delayed orders, scraps of quarrel and panic. He waited for something similar here, for raised voices, complaints, hurried adjustments. Nothing of the kind happened. No anxious footsteps in the kitchen. The washing machine in the laundry did not stop mid-cycle. The farmer's wife only slid the milk bottles on the table slightly farther into the shade and kept the water standing in the basin instead of dumping it. as if merely moving one action to a different place in the sequence. The whole set of responses was as calm as dealing with a minor change in the weather, not a brief interruption of a key resource. Andre felt a strange hollow open in his chest. Standing in the barn doorway, his palms grew inexplicably damp. He watched the family ride out this small pause without losing their pattern. Each person changed only a tiny part of their routine, as if a system had absorbed a vibration and the structure remained unmoved. No scrambling, no panic, no urgency. He slowly understood. This household did not depend on warm water, it depended on predictability. Warm water was just one node. Everything, radio, storage, cleaning, cooking, branched off the same stable line. Any temporary break in a branch was absorbed by the whole and did not unbalance it. In that moment he realized he had been wrong. Utterly wrong. He had thought warm water was a threat, a liquid that might hide chemicals, a new trap beyond war. But what truly frightened him was not the water. It was the pattern he did not understand, the stability he could not control. On the front, stability always meant something has you in its sights. Here, stability meant something is protecting you. The reversal pinned him to the threshold of the barn for a long time. It felt as if a new stone had been pressed deep into his chest, heavy, impossible to drop, impossible to ignore. When the hot water came back, he heard the familiar sound of running water from the kitchen. He did not go over, but his body reacted in a new and strange way, not with fear, but with the hesitant pull of a mind being forced to recalibrate. That evening he finally mustered the courage to step into the sink area again. Steam was once more floating in the air. He stretched out his hand and held it before the stream, his nose dipping into the mist again and again. Then, like an apprentice testing an unknown device, he moved his fingers slowly into the water. This time the care in his movements was no longer just fear, but also an adjustment. The warmth on his skin was neither cold nor hot, more moderate than he remembered. The tightness in the back of his hand eased a little. He did not keep his hand under for long, pulling away quickly to rinse it in cold water, but the motion was no longer as panicked as before. It had the quality of reclassification. Danger had failed to appear, and now stability itself was the thing to be studied. As he shut off the faucet, he heard the faint rasp of metal on metal. For the first time it did not sound alien, but like the worn mark of repeated use, linking him lightly to the household's order. He did not immediately change his routine after that. He still chose cold water most of the time. He still judged cleanliness and risk with the instincts of the front. But the change had already begun somewhere deeper in his body. Each time steam rose from the basin, his shoulders no longer snapped taut. They registered a strange, tentative response between caution and curiosity, as if his body had discovered a new path ahead of his thoughts. The shift first showed in his hands. He noticed that old scars on the backs of his hands turned pale under cold water, but regained their normal color in the few seconds after a warm rinse. He had never had the conditions to notice such differences at the front. There, water was always either freezing or filthy. It could suppress wounds, but never reveal how the skin was healing. For the first time he realized warm water might not be a hazard at all, but a kind of surplus he had never known. He did not fully understand the word, but on this southern farm, surplus was everywhere. Milk arriving in a crate on the porch every day, eggs stacked in neat rows, the constant chill inside the refrigerator, guarding supplies day and night. Even the markings on the laundry boxes were a manifestation of surplus. Here, the family did not rely on instinct, experience, or the tension in their hands. They relied on a system that kept daily life from breaking apart. Andre began watching the washing process whenever he had a spare moment. Standing in the doorway of the laundry, he watched the drum turn, watched the powder dissolve into light foam. With warm water, the foam was more even, the cleaning faster, the cloth lifted from the tub without grains of grit between its fibers. He had never seen anything like it. At the front, cleaning a rag meant brute force, friction and freezing water, not this gentle but steady process. He asked no questions. His habit in unknown systems was to stay silent and build his assessments layer by layer. He started to rebuild his idea of water, not with the logic of the old world, but with the new rhythms he observed here. One afternoon, while putting the barn in order, he noticed a fellow prisoner helping with picking had gotten a splinter wound on his palm. The cut wasn't deep, but there was dust in it. Instinct carried Andrei toward cold water, but when he reached the kitchen door, he stopped. The air was hot and damp that day. Steam rose lightly from the sink, and the cold water would sting more than usual. Warm water might clean the wound better, dislodge the wood fibers more easily. He went to the sink and, for the first time, turned the left handle on purpose. The warmth rose quickly, as if a rhythm had been waiting for his confirmation. He didn't immediately bring the wound to the stream. First, he placed his own hand under the flow, letting his skin adjust. A subtle easing spread over his fingers like tight muscles being gently smoothed. Only after a few seconds did he motion for the other man to hold out his hand. The fragments washed away swiftly. The skin cleared. The wounded hand trembled slightly under the water, not from pain, but from strangeness. Watching this, something narrow opened inside Andrei. He suddenly saw that the roughness of field hygiene had never been how it had to be. It was only what happened when there was no choice. Here, for the first time, he had a choice. He patted the hand dry with the towel, his touch no longer defensive but steady. He did not explain anything, did not make a point of it. He simply finished the care and let that soft stream become a kind of unspoken phrase. After that day, he began to switch regularly between warm and cold, no longer seeing temperature as something to mistrust in absolute terms. He used warm water to clean minor splits from hay cuts, cold to flush sweat and dust, and learned to watch the difference each made to the skin. He even started to fold warm water into his professional logic, like adding a new tool to an old kit, one that made the old kit a little less heavy. His movements grew easier. Turning the handles, he no longer hesitated. His motions were slow, sure, and nearly silent. He learned to mix hot and cold to find a temperature right for skin without unnecessary waste. He discovered that warm water was not there to make life luxurious, but to give hands back some feeling after work. The steam that had once alarmed him became nothing more than a normal element of the air. Sometimes at day's end he stood at the sink and let warm water run over his knuckles and palm, as if recalibrating his senses. It was not indulgence, but adaptation to a new rhythm. He understood now that his old vigilance against danger came from a world without surplus. His reluctance to accept stability came from being dropped into a world with too much of it. Time flowed by with the radio's signals. He gradually learned to mark the day with these steady structures instead of instinct or tension. He could even feel the subtle differences behind the water. Morning warmth slightly cooler than evening, midday reaching the set temperature faster, a small wobble on maintenance days that never slid into chaos. He assembled in his head a larger picture of the world, a world with hidden systems, stable supply, and people who did not have to question the source of every drop they touched. He had never had such an understanding at the front, nor imagined such a rhythm could exist. Between experiment and observation, he realized he had already stepped quietly out of the old world and into the new, no longer frozen at the threshold. What he saw now in warm water was neither danger nor trap, but a way of living he once thought could never be his. When news of repatriation came down through the camp, grass seeds were already floating in the air. The radio's tone remained calm as ever. Only a short segment mentioned that a group of prisoners, under a certain list, should prepare to return to Europe. Names were read slowly, like a set of sealed memories being checked one by one. When Andrei heard his, there was none of the rush of relief he had once imagined, no sudden blow to the chest. He simply stood there, as if waiting for some voice behind him, far away, to explain it again. He was allowed to gather his belongings. Belongings meant little. A few towels that had been washed so many times their cloth felt almost soft, a cloth bundle folded countless times, and a couple of simple tools he had used in the farm work. At a wooden table by the barn, he laid them out and folded them back in order. The patterns of light across the grass moved slowly. Nothing in the scene seemed in a hurry. He realized he had grown used to this pace, a pace that no brief announcement and no small change could dislodge. When he was done, he went back to the side kitchen door. It was as quiet as on the day he arrived, only the air carried the heavier warmth of late summer. He did not enter immediately. As before, he paused on the threshold, not in hesitation, but in the measured tempo the place had taught him. He knew this would be his last time at the sink, and that among all the experiences of those months, what had truly altered him was neither the work nor the status of prisoner, but this ordinary metal faucet. He stepped closer. The twin handles glowed dully, their surfaces finely scratched by countless turns. He reached for the left and opened it with the ease of a gesture done many months in a row. The water came down at once, cool for a moment, then exactly at the temperature his palms remembered. He cupped his hands under it, muscles relaxed, letting the warmth spread, not to wash away anything in particular, but to confirm the familiar rule. One twist and warm water would adjust itself into a range that could be trusted. He did not rush to turn it off or let the heat rise too high. He held the balance. Watching the water slide between his fingers, he felt something he could not name, not warmth, not dependence, but an understanding of predictability as a fact. He realized that what he had feared had never truly been the warmth itself, but the rules of a world beyond his own, and over the last months he had, piece by piece, learned to accept those rules as normal. He shut the left handle and opened the right, letting cold water splash down, plain, sharp, unmistakable. He placed his hands under it and let the warmth drain away. The movement was simple but carried the clear line of an ending. Warm water was the brief future he had touched on foreign soil. Cold water was the reality he was going back to. He stayed there for a moment, shook the drops off, and dried his hands on the rough towel. Outside, the call to assemble sounded. Steady. Unhurried. He left the kitchen without looking back. The faint smell of water and soap lingered in the air behind him like a reference mark he would carry inside. That mark would not vanish with his departure. It would reappear in him whenever he faced new disorder, scarcity, or abrupt change, reminding him that there had once been a world where warm water, time, and order were taken as the default structure. Climbing into the truck that would take the prisoners away, he still felt a trace of that warmth in his palms. It was not longing, not attachment, but an understanding drawn out of the smallest of acts. Stability is not a trap. Surplus is not a sin. It is often those left behind by their era who mistake the most ordinary things for shadows. The engine started. The wheels rolled over dry grass. The farm's sky and light slid backward in the dust. He lifted his right hand and looked at it, the hand that had once fought to stay clean in the coldest, dirtiest water it could find, now subtly rearranged by a brief, steady warmth. That warmth would not last long, but it was enough to serve as a hidden coordinate, telling him that for a few months he had once stood in the future.